I can still hear their laughter, that cruel, dismissive sound echoing around the room like a storm that wouldn't pass. "You're a mistake," they said, just like that, right to my face, in front of everyone. And I believed it for a while, until the day came when I stood at the head of the company they laughed at. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story. At 52, I felt like the world was finally beginning to see me, not as a failure, but as someone with vision. My name's Helen Garrison, and though the past 2 decades of my life weren't exactly glamorous, they had shaped me into who I was today. I wasn't your typical CEO, no sharp suits or sleek office towers, but here I was, standing in a cramped but cozy little space I'd called home for years, surrounded by ideas and papers that would eventually lead to something bigger. It wasn't always like this. Growing up in a small town outside of Chicago, people didn't expect much from someone like me. I was the quiet one in the back, scribbling ideas in notebooks while others worked in factories or joined their family businesses. My mom worked at a local diner, and my dad, well, he left when I was just a kid. I had no inheritance, no silver spoon, just a fierce determination that no one, especially not the people in my life, could take away from me. And then there were the others, the ones who laughed. I remember the moment clearly. It was my second job out of college, working for a mid-sized marketing firm that specialized in helping small businesses grow. They had these team meetings where everyone had to pitch ideas for new projects, and most of the time, I kept quiet. I wasn't as polished as the others. I didn't wear the right clothes. My ideas didn't come wrapped in fancy jargon like theirs. One day, after one of my presentations, a colleague named Dan, a guy who'd been there for years, made his usual snide comment. He had this smirk that made my blood boil every time he used it. "That's cute, Helen," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You really think this company would buy into that? You're a mistake if you think your little ideas are worth anything." The whole room laughed at me. It wasn't just the words that stung. It was the look in their eyes, the way they saw me, the way they believed that I was less than, that I was nothing. For months after that, I believed him. I stayed quiet. I told myself I didn't have what it took. I didn't belong. I had no business even dreaming big. But deep down, I knew there was something more in me, something waiting to be unlocked. One night, in the middle of another meaningless meeting, I had a realization. I couldn't keep pretending I was small. I couldn't let people like Dan tell me who I was. So I started a company, a tiny little marketing firm with no clients, no investors, nothing but me and a laptop. It wasn't glamorous. I didn't even tell anyone at work. But every day I chipped away at it. I worked after hours. I learned new skills. I pushed myself when it felt impossible. And I waited for the day when I could show them, show everyone. That moment came sooner than I thought. The first few years were brutal. I had no safety net, no backup plan. It was just me, some worn-out office supplies, and the belief that I could make something of myself, despite everything everyone had said. I didn't start with any big clients or high-paying contracts. No, I started small, like really small. I got local businesses, mom-and-pop stores, to trust me. And for every business that rejected me, there was another one that gave me a shot. One of those was a bakery down the street from where I lived. It was owned by a woman named Sue. Sue had been running her little shop for 20 years, but hadn't yet figured out how to reach more customers. She was skeptical at first when I pitched my marketing plan, but she gave me a chance. I promised I'd work for free for a month just to prove my worth. "What's the worst that could happen?" I told her. "If it doesn't work, you don't owe me anything." She hesitated, but agreed. That was my break. I put everything I had into that bakery. Social media campaigns, flyers, email newsletters. I visited every day, got to know the customers, made sure her brand had a voice. By the end of that month, sales had increased by 30%. It was a small victory, but it was mine. Sue referred me to a friend who owned a local fitness studio. That led to a law firm. Slowly but surely, my name started circulating. But I wasn't just building my business, I was building something more. I was building a reputation, one that could stand on its own. A reputation that told everyone, especially Dan and the others from that miserable office, that I wasn't a mistake. As the months passed, I started hiring help, freelancers, then full-time employees. It wasn't a fast climb, but it was steady. It felt like everything was finally moving in the right direction. But there was one thing I didn't anticipate. The people from my past didn't just fade away. They came back, like ghosts. In particular, there was Dan. It had been 5 years since I'd last seen him. He'd moved to another firm, but I heard things about him, things that didn't surprise me. He was still riding the coattails of his position, still arrogant, still dismissive of anyone who didn't fit into his narrow vision of success. Then one afternoon, out of the blue, I got a call. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Helen Garrison?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes," I said, though I was already feeling uneasy. Who could this be? "This is Dan. You remember me, right?" The smugness was unmistakable. I froze for a second. "Dan, why are you calling me?" "I wanted to let you know that I've got a big client that needs a marketing team," he continued. "And, well, I know you've got your little company and all, but I wanted to ask if you'd like to work with us on a few projects. Nothing too major, just to get your feet wet." It took everything in me not to laugh. This was the same man who had called me a mistake. This was the same guy who had belittled me in front of everyone, but I couldn't let it show. I kept my voice steady, my tone professional. "I think I'm doing just fine, Dan. Thanks for the offer, but I'm good." I hung up without saying another word. But the anger burned inside me. I'd built my company from the ground up, only to have him try and act like he was doing me a favor. No, I wasn't going to let him back into my life. Not like this. That night, as I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, a new determination sparked inside me. I was done being the one who played it small. I was going to show them all. Not just Dan, but everyone who doubted me. I wasn't just going to succeed, I was going to own this industry. The next few years were pivotal. My business grew at an accelerated rate, but so did the resistance. In some ways, I welcomed it. A challenge was always a sign I was moving in the right direction. But this was different. I'll never forget the day I got the first letter from a competitor. It was a formal notice from a larger agency, one with a lot of the same clients I was slowly pulling in. They'd heard about my success and were ready to bring me down to size. It was subtle at first, a letter outlining all the ways they believed I was violating industry norms and ethics. Of course, it was all nonsense, just an attempt to shake me. But they didn't stop there. A few weeks later, I received a second letter, then a third. Each one grew more aggressive, and each one hinted at potential lawsuits if I didn't cease and desist. My heart sank when I read the final letter. It was a direct threat to take legal action if I didn't step back from a few of my major accounts. I spent hours on the phone with my lawyer, who assured me there was nothing to worry about. "This is just a tactic to intimidate you, Helen," he said. "You're in the clear. They have no legal ground to stand on." But it wasn't the legality that scared me. It was the fear that maybe they were right, maybe I was in over my head. The doubt crept in at night when the office was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts. Had I made the wrong decision? Had I built this company only for it to crumble under pressure? One afternoon, I found myself sitting across from an old acquaintance, someone who had once worked with me back in the days when I was still struggling to get my footing. Her name was Tina. She wasn't just a colleague. She was someone who had believed in me when everyone else wrote me off. "What's going on, Helen?" she asked, noticing my anxiety as soon as I sat down. "You've been distracted lately. Your mind's not here." I took a deep breath. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, Tina. The legal threats, the competitors trying to undermine us, it's all getting to me. I'm not sure how much longer I can handle it." Tina didn't look at me with pity. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine with a kind of intensity that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't been in a long time. "Helen," she said, "I've watched you work. You've been pushed down your whole life, and now you're here, running your own company. Don't let anyone take that away from you. You have something they can't steal. You have heart. You're not a mistake. You never were." Those words hit harder than I expected. They didn't make everything magically better, but they were the spark I needed. Tina had reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, that I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every moment when I was told I didn't belong, for every time I was made to feel small. I left that coffee shop with a new resolve. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let these companies, these faceless entities that had no idea what it meant to fight for something real, destroy what I had built. I had worked too hard for this. And then there was Dan. As much as I tried to push him out of my mind, he lingered. It wasn't just that he was trying to play the game again, it was that he thought I'd forgotten who he was. He didn't understand what I'd become, but I was about to make sure he did. I put together a new campaign for my company, a big one. It was bold, it was risky, and it would put me on the map in ways I hadn't yet imagined. If they were going to come after me, I was going to fight back in a way they could never predict. It wasn't just a marketing campaign, it was a statement. The day I launched it, the numbers exploded. My website traffic tripled, and the calls from potential clients came pouring in. The message I had sent out was clear. I wasn't just another competitor, I was here to stay. And I was on a mission. That night I received a call from my lawyer. "They're pulling back," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I don't know what you did, but they've dropped all threats. They're backing off." I smiled. But it wasn't a smile of relief. It was a smile of victory. The next morning, as I walked into the office, something felt different. Not just the energy of the team, but a shift in the air. It was as though the world was finally starting to recognize me, not just as Helen Garrison, the woman who had built something from nothing, but as someone who wasn't going to be stopped by anyone. And then, just when I thought things were settling down, I got another call. This time, it wasn't from a lawyer or a client. It was Dan. The phone rang once, twice before I picked it up. My heart skipped a beat, but I tried to keep my voice steady, not giving him the satisfaction of knowing how much his name still affected me. "Hello, Helen?" The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Dan. I took a slow breath before answering. "Dan, what's up?" "I think we need to talk," he said, his voice oddly calm. "I think you and I both know it's time to clear the air." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the window, trying to gather my thoughts. "Clear the air?" I repeated, incredulous. "You were the one who tried to crush me, remember?" "That was a long time ago, Helen. People change." The way he said it, so smooth like a man who believed his own lies, made my skin crawl. I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "What do you want, Dan?" "I want to make things right," he said. "Look, I know I said some things, and maybe I didn't handle things the best way back then, but I'm not that guy anymore. I've been watching you, and I'll admit, you've built something impressive, but I think you and I could do even bigger things together. I'm not saying you can't handle your own, but imagine the kind of power we could have if we joined forces." I almost laughed. I could hear it in his voice. He was used to getting what he wanted, and this was no different. He didn't want to admit I had succeeded on my own. He wanted to be part of it. He wanted to claim some of the glory. "I don't need you, Dan," I said, my voice sharp. "You didn't believe in me back then, and now that I've built something of my own, you think I'm just going to forget everything and team up with you? That's not how this works." I heard a sigh on the other end of the line, followed by a moment of silence. "I know you're angry," he said, a tone of condescension slipping through his words. "But maybe it's time for you to accept that we could both benefit from this. You've reached a point where you need real backing. You need resources, Helen. We could take over the market together." I leaned forward, feeling a surge of adrenaline rush through me. I'd spent too many years hearing people like him tell me what I could or couldn't do. And now he was standing there, asking me to give up everything I'd worked for, everything I had fought for. "You still don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice steady but filled with an underlying power I hadn't tapped into until now. "I'm not here to be some pawn in your game. I didn't fight my way up just to have someone like you tell me what I need. I'm not your project, Dan, and I'm certainly not your mistake." There was a pause on the other end. He was probably shocked by my response, but I didn't care. "All right, Helen," he finally said, his voice cold. "You'll regret this. Trust me." I didn't give him the satisfaction of responding. I just hung up. I spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had happened. I had made it this far without anyone's help, without anyone believing in me. Why would I give him the satisfaction of becoming part of my success? I was done being underestimated. This was my time, and I would never let anyone like Dan try to rewrite my story. Then, just when I thought I could breathe again, I got a message that would change everything. It came through an email. Nothing fancy, just a simple subject line. I know what you're doing. I clicked it open. Inside was a detailed message from someone I didn't know, someone who seemed to know far too much about my company. They'd been following my every move, tracking my business decisions, monitoring my clients. The tone of the email was cold, almost threatening. It was clear they were trying to intimidate me into backing down. The message ended with a chilling line, "We'll be in touch soon." I sat there staring at the screen, trying to understand what was happening. Who could be behind this and why now? It didn't take long for me to connect the dots. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear that someone, maybe Dan or someone else who didn't want to see me succeed, was trying to take me down. They saw me as a threat. They saw my rise as something they couldn't control. And that was when I made my decision. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them play these games anymore. It was time to take control, to fight back in ways they wouldn't expect. I started strategizing. I contacted my lawyer again and started gathering evidence. I looked at my company's operations with a sharper eye, ready to find any weakness someone could exploit. And then I did something that surprised even me. I reached out to a few people who had once been in my corner. People who had seen me struggle, who had witnessed my growth, and who knew exactly what I was capable of. One of them was Tina, my old friend. I needed her now more than ever. She listened patiently as I explained what had happened over the last few weeks. "You know I've got your back," she said. "We'll figure this out." "Thanks," I said, feeling a small sense of relief. "But I need more than just help. I need to send a message to everyone." Tina's voice was quiet but resolute. "We're going to make them regret underestimating you. I couldn't keep playing defense. I had spent too much of my life trying to survive. Now it was time to dominate. I knew this wasn't going to be a simple business maneuver. It was going to be a war. And when I looked back at the kind of fight I was facing, it became clear to me, this wasn't just about proving I could build something on my own. This was about creating a legacy that no one could erase. They had laughed at me once. Now I was going to make them regret it. But how? I had to be smart, calculated. I wasn't going to fight this battle in a boardroom or through emails. That would be too easy. No, I needed something that would hit them hard, something they couldn't ignore. The email had been my first clue. "We'll be in touch soon." The tone was unmistakable. Whoever was behind this knew exactly how to strike fear. And they'd been watching me for a while. I reached out to Tina first. "I think I know who's behind this," I told her, the words slow, deliberate. "It's not just Dan, it's his new backers, people with money and influence. They're scared of what we're doing, Tina. They're terrified we might take over." Tina didn't hesitate. "So what's our next move?" "I need to put the fear of God in them," I said, feeling a wave of determination crash over me. "And I know just how to do it." The plan was simple in theory, but complicated in execution. I was going to buy out their top client. I'd been tracking their contracts for months, picking apart their weaknesses, studying the dynamics of their biggest deals. The company they were most protective of was a tech giant called Fenwick Solutions. They were at the top of the market, a partner to many of Dan's biggest clients. If I could land Fenwick as a client, not only would I deal a blow to their credibility, I'd put myself on the map in a way no one could deny. But to do that, I needed to make sure Fenwick knew exactly what I could offer them. I wasn't just going to throw them a generic pitch. No, I was going to deliver a tailored, aggressive proposal, one that would show them exactly how weak their current partnership was. I spent 2 days crafting the proposal, working late into the night. I dug deep into Fenwick's operations, learned everything I could about their pain points, and crafted a strategy that would make them rethink everything about their current team. By the 3rd day, I felt ready, but I knew I couldn't do this alone. I called Tina. "You ready for this?" she asked when she picked up. "I'm about to drop a bomb on them," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment. "I need you with me. This has to be perfect." The day of the presentation arrived, and everything fell into place. We had set up a meeting with Fenwick's senior management, an intimidating group. They were sharp, skeptical, and far too busy to waste their time on anyone who couldn't back up their words. When we entered the room, I could feel the tension in the air. They all eyed me carefully, their arms crossed, expressions cold. "Good afternoon," I said, holding my ground. "Thank you for your time. I know you've been happy with your current team, but what I'm about to show you will change everything." Tina handed over a detailed, beautifully designed packet of the proposal. I started walking them through it, showing them how their current marketing was outdated, how they weren't reaching their audience effectively, how they were missing out on valuable opportunities. I could see their brows furrow as they started to realize what I was saying was true. By the time I was done, the room had shifted. There was no longer a sense of skepticism in the air. Now there was interest. And even better, there was doubt. Doubt about their current agency. "You're offering something very different," one of the executives said, leaning forward. "I can't say we've had that kind of perspective before. What makes you so sure this will work?" I didn't hesitate. "Because I've built this business from the ground up. I've faced more challenges than you can count. I've been knocked down, kicked around, told I wasn't good enough. But here I am, ready to show you that my way works. No gimmicks, no empty promises." The room went quiet. The air was thick with expectation. After a long pause, the executive spoke again. "All right, Helen, let's give it a shot. We'll start small, just a test run. But if this works, you'll have our full business." My heart raced, not out of fear, but from sheer exhilaration. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. "Thank you," I said, smiling confidently. "You won't regret it." That afternoon, Tina and I walked out of the building, adrenaline still coursing through our veins. "We did it," she said, laughing. "You're unstoppable." But I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. As we drove back to the office, I pulled out my phone and sent a message to my lawyer. "It's time. We go on the offensive. Make them regret every move they've made against me." I wasn't just going to beat them, I was going to leave them in the dust. But just as I was about to put the phone away, I received another message. This one was from Dan. The subject line, "We need to talk." I opened it, almost laughing at how predictable he was. He was still out there, still thinking he could manipulate me. I clicked open the message and read it, but this time it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a plea for a partnership, it was a simple line. "You've won this round, but you won't last." I stared at the words for a long time, but something inside me clicked into place. He didn't understand. I wasn't in this for a round, I was in it for the long game, and I was winning. The email from Dan wasn't a threat, it was a surrender. And that realization hit me like a wave, crashing over me with a force I hadn't anticipated. He was done fighting, and as much as I wanted to believe that he was just throwing in the towel, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he was underestimating me one final time. It was funny, every time he thought he had me on the ropes, I'd found a way to get back up. But this time, I wasn't getting up. I was staying on top. I had gotten the deal with Fenwick, which was huge. My company was now in a position to take over the market. No one could deny that. The moment I walked out of that meeting room with them, it felt like a door had opened. One I had spent years trying to pry open. And now the entire world was watching. They would see what I could do. They would see how wrong they had been to doubt me. But even with this victory in my pocket, I knew the final chapter hadn't been written yet. There were still battles to be fought. The war wasn't over. A few days after the Fenwick meeting, I sat in my office watching the emails come in. Every ping was a reminder that my life was different now. My business was booming. I was no longer the woman everyone thought was crazy for even dreaming of success. Now, I was the one people looked to for inspiration. And yet, I couldn't escape the feeling that Dan's message was still looming over me. "You won't last." I'd heard those words before, just not in such a bold, final way. This time, I wasn't so sure if he was wrong. I knew I had the power, the drive, and the strategy. But there was something deep inside me, something stubborn, that told me the fight wasn't over. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the need to prove something to everyone who had ever doubted me. But I couldn't just sit back and let him walk away from this. I needed to show him that this wasn't just about the company or the deals or the success. It was about me. So I called Tina again. "I've been thinking," I said, leaning back in my chair, "about Dan, about everything." Tina's voice came through, steady as always. "I know. What are you thinking?" "I think I need to hit them where it hurts the most. Not just in the business world, but in their personal lives too." Tina was silent for a moment. "What do you mean?" "You know how much they care about their reputation. I've got information that could ruin them. If I want to make sure they know exactly who they're dealing with, I need to remind them of everything they've done to me." She didn't speak right away, but I could feel her hesitation. "Helen, you're talking about going nuclear. Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm done being the underdog," I said, my voice sharp with finality. "It's time they see what happens when you push someone too far. I didn't fight this hard just to back down now." We spent the next few hours laying out a plan, carefully, methodically. The last thing I wanted was to make a move too soon, too rashly. I needed to be precise. The following week, I met with my lawyer, a woman who had been with me every step of the way, supporting me through every high and low. Her eyes were sharp as she reviewed the evidence we had on Dan and his team. A few of the things we had uncovered were enough to bring them down legally. Others were more personal, connections, alliances, and deals they thought no one would ever notice. "We've got them," she said, leaning back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "But we need to be careful. This is the kind of thing that can get ugly fast." "Ugly?" I scoffed. "They made it ugly the day they laughed at me. Now I'm making sure they see just how wrong they were." She nodded. "Then let's get to work." I knew this wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick. But I also knew it would be worth it. I had spent years letting people walk all over me, and now it was my turn to make them feel that sting. As the days passed, I continued pushing forward with Fenwick. The deal was progressing faster than I had ever imagined, and each step felt like a victory. The work was intense, but I thrived in the chaos. It reminded me of the days when I was scrapping to get by, but now I had the resources and the leverage to change the game. The calls were getting bigger, the projects were getting bolder, and most importantly, my competitors were starting to notice. One afternoon, as I was going through some emails, another message came through. It was from Dan again. This time, the subject line read, "We need to talk. This can't end like this." I clicked it open, knowing exactly what it would say. "Helen, I've done some thinking. I don't want this to go any further. I've made mistakes, and I'm ready to make things right. We can come to an agreement. Just let me know when you're ready." I didn't even have to think about it. I typed out a quick response. "It's already too late." I hit send. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The truth was, this wasn't about business anymore. It wasn't about revenge either. It was about taking control of my life. It was about walking into the room and not having to prove anything to anyone. They'd laughed at me, they'd tried to shut me down, and now I had everything they said I could never have. My company, my success, my power, and I was just getting started. Before I close this chapter, I want to leave you with a thought. Don't let anyone define your worth. Don't let them tell you where you belong. If you keep fighting, if you keep believing in yourself, you will get there. And when you do, you'll see. No one can ever take that away from you.